cell. Everything's under control.
One of the best horror video games I remember growing up playing was without a doubt The Suffering. This action horror game was one of the last big budget titles published by Midway Games before declaring bankruptcy by the mid-2000s and being purchased by Warner Brothers. The game centered around the muted protagonist Torque, a death row inmate who is believed to have killed his wife and 2 sons after a fit of rage. The very same day he arrives on Carnet Island and makes Abbott State Penitentiary his home, a massive earthquake erupts, leaving most of the prison without power. And out of nowhere, these strange paranormal creatures of various sizes and malice take over the prison and island. As Torque, you must fight your way through these paranormal creatures and eventually escape the island. I can personally say that I've never been a true horror video game fan, but The Suffering wasn't your average horror game. Unlike most successful horror series like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, the game didn't feature long cutscenes to explain the story. Rather, it had the player piecing together the full story of the game and the setting through the various interesting storytelling techniques. Most relevant is the fact that the game didn't make you feel weak or hopeless in surviving encounters. And that's just because it was an action horror game, more akin to titles such as Onimusha or Dead Space in a few ways. Players didn't have to worry about managing limited inventories or conserving ammunition. It also lacked the conventional gameplay design seen in other horror games as well, such as the lack of fixed cameras or overly confusing puzzles that force players to backtrack to previous areas visited. Very few horror games made the player feel as empowered as The Suffering did. Not only did you have a fair chance against every creature you encountered, but you also largely determined how the game would end based on the decisions you made. The Suffering was one of the first big budget video games to actually implement a morality system, whereas the decisions you made in the game, whether they be good or bad, would determine the ending. Sort of in the same way you could determine the ending in games like Fallout New Vegas or Skyrim. The Suffering, while selling over 1.5 million copies, isn't really seen as one of the best horror-style video games of the 6th console generation, and that's a shame. So in this retrospective, I want to overview what exactly made The Suffering a superb experience for any gamer. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. And if you like these kind of deep dives into classic video games, make sure you leave a like and a comment.
Good to see another human. Wait, what the fuck? Oh,
2004. I spoke about this year plenty of times in several videos, and well, I wouldn't be far off in calling this year a magical year for gamers regardless of what console you owned or plugged into your TV. This was the same year that gamers got another acclaimed action horror title, Resident Evil 4. RE4 basically revived the already boring and stale Resident Evil series by taking away those boring and irritating conventions and simply focusing on the action. More than anything, this represented a new direction that horror games were moving in, providing an action-packed gunfire intense struggle against creatures that go bump in the night. The trend started out slow in 2004, but in the preceding years during the next console generation, well, you had a number of different action titles appearing on both PC and console that had a horror theme. Many people would probably tip their hats off to Capcom, as even before RE4, they made notable contributions to the action horror genre, with series like Onimusha and Devil May Cry. But let's not forget about the short-lived studio Surreal Software. Prior to making The Sufferer in 2004, the company saw a great deal of success with releases like the Draken series and Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring. Prior to getting purchased by Midway Games, the company had been in the works of making a Western-themed RPG title known as Gunslinger, a game that would have used a morality system spoken about earlier. But by 2002, the idea had been abandoned for another project, this time called Unspeakable, that would eventually be the blueprints for The Suffering. From the start, the team at Surreal wanted their horror-themed video game to be based in a real and scary contemporary location that most people already dread the idea of going. I was only 11 years old when I first visited Eastern State Penitentiary in my hometown of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I went with my 5th grade class on a field trip, and I still remember walking around the cold and dusty remnants of one of the most notorious prisons in American history. Forget about all the scary locations you've seen in films. Prison was a real and frightening place that anyone could find themselves in. And particularly Eastern State was one of the first prisons notorious for the way it mentally and physically tortured its prisoners. The decision to make the central location an actual prison spoke to the fact that Surreal wanted to set the player in a setting where they could infuse the player with some of the bleaker aspects of American history. As stated by lead designer Richard Rouse, the team would include the darkest elements of American history. Besides prison life, the game's narrative would incorporate the themes of slavery, racism, unethical medical experimentation, mob-style executions, and legal executions as well. By early 2000 standards, this was some very serious subject matter to include in a video game. I doubt few developers to this day would incorporate such themes, and that's what allowed the Suffering story to really stand out. In terms of programming the game, the development team originally went with a lock-on target style control seen in games such as Siphon Filler and DMZ. Just a year before the game was finished, they decided to implement a double-stick control scheme seen in popular shooters at the time like Halo and Max Payne. The newest system would improve the gameplay quite a way. It challenged players to aim at the target while disadvantaging more novice players who had originally relied on lock-on targets. And I was someone who grew up playing plenty of shooters. I can say that I always enjoyed a fixed target that had to be aimed, mostly because it takes away from the endless repetition of locking on the targets to fire. And frankly, I felt that more third-person games should have taken this route as well. There's a reason why The Suffering sold as well as it did. Well, okay, there are multiple reasons why. But mainly it was the fun and challenging gameplay with some interesting details and visuals that couldn't be found anywhere else.
I hope for the Suffering license, first and foremost, is this game is a successful game. That everyone enjoys playing it, that it's scary, that the creatures are cool, and that it's a successful game standing on its own. Selfishly beyond that, most importantly for me, is to create the produce the movie based on the game.
Let's start with the gameplay, as this was an action horror shooter. So 90% of the time is spent shooting ugly creatures looking to cut your head off or inject you with poison. You move around with Torque with the double stick controls, along with dodging enemy attacks by pressing R2 and moving in whatever direction you wish to go. Controlling Torque is fairly easy with few if any problems. You can run and shoot with the R1 button and quickly switch between weapons and grenades by using the D-pad. Torque can move pretty quick, but he can also jump back with the best of them. For firepower, you get a somewhat decent variety of weapons and tools. You get the revolver and dual revolvers, along with a nifty shotgun and the classic Chicago typewriter known as the Tommy gun. And they even threw in a flamethrower as well. On occasions, you can commandeer an M2 Browning machine gun turret. In addition to guns, you can also find a decent array of explosives. You start off with just the simple flash grenades, but you soon will find dynamite, Molotov cocktails, and even some shrapnel grenades towards the end, all of which can be tossed by hitting the L1 button. The inventory allows you to hold 8 of each, so you can blast yourself out of rough situations. And when the shit really hits the fan, Torque can transform into a blade-wielding monster with 2 different attacks for a short duration of time. This comes with a small cost to your health, but you can basically do this each time your rage meter is full.
Would you say you have visions of bloodshed? Yeah.
The Suffering isn't exactly a hard game to complete, But it does get challenging at times, and that's mostly due to the persistent nature of the monsters in the game, or creatures, or supernatural entities, whatever you want to call them. The creatures like marksmen and infestors are easy enough since they move slowly, but creatures like the slayers, mainliners, and infirmas move quickly and can dodge attacks with relative ease. These creatures also come with their own form of attacks as well. For instance, the mainliners are able to inject Torque with a poison that slowly drains his health. You also have those Burrowers, who are able to quickly travel underground and spring out from behind you. What I really enjoyed about the creature encounters was the use of sound cues to alert you to their presence. Each of the creatures has their own sound cues that can be detected. For instance, you will know that the Slayers are around whenever you hear the clank or scratching of metal. The mainliners typically form up whenever you see a puddle of water on the ground. Particularly, you will hear eerie popping noise followed by some screams. For the Firmas, you will hear the laughter of 3 girls in the distance. Another challenging aspect of the suffering is found in the puzzles. While not as hard as the puzzles found in other horror games, they can still be difficult. Particularly in this game, the puzzles don't have you searching for keys or some old artifacts to advance. Rather, it presents you with a real-world problem. For instance, one section of the prison had the entranceway completely on fire. To solve this, I nearly had to engage with the broken water pipe and then move a large box over a vent to flood the floor, which in turn put out the fire. By far the least challenging aspect of the games were the boss fights. Well, I actually hesitate to call them boss fights due to the fact that they're really easy. Much like the puzzles, the boss encounters will simply have you manipulating objects within the stages.
T, listen to me. You gotta get out of there. That island's more than just a prison, it's so much worse. It brings out the worst in everyone. Get out of there, T. Run! Run as fast as you can!
The major aspect that will draw even the most casual fan into the suffering is the story. It truly was like nothing else found in any horror game at the time. Particularly, you were not just uncovering the story related to Torque's past, but also the history of the island and prison as well. The full story of Carnet Island and Abbott are masterly told through 2 ways. The most apparent are the slow motion blurs that you encounter in each stage. In designing the grand narrative of the game, Surreal Software drew inspiration from the storytelling techniques found in films such as The Shining. These slow motion blurs showcase flashbacks pertaining to the previous events that happened on Carnet Island. Additionally, you can find keynotes and archive pages that can be accessed in the start screen and main menu. Another way to experience the story of the game is through the creature encounters. Each of the strange and twisted creatures serve as representations of the awful crimes against humanity carried out on Carnet and in Abbott Penitentiary. Let's take this time to deep dive into the history of Carnet Island and explain how these creatures came about. Located 10 miles off the coast of Maryland, Carnet Island was settled around the early 1600s by Puritans who immigrated to the New World. The first known location where the Puritans settled was the small town of Goodsmouth. It was here in 1681 that 11 innocent Puritan men and women were accused of practicing witchcraft and were burnt alive at the stake. While witch trials were somewhat common in states like Maryland and Massachusetts, most of the time trials ended with the accused being hanged. But here, the residents took it a step too far. Their fears clouding their judgment is what caused them to commit this cruel act, all stemming from false accusations made by 3 teenage girls at the time.
Why did they believe us? We never thought they'd really do it. It all went wrong. It was fun at first.
It's safe to say that after the burnings, they were driven mad by the pain they caused, and probably more likely killed themselves as a result. These girls now exist as the creatures known as the Firmas, the flame-wielding creatures who like to circle around their victims and trap them in a circle of fire. The burning site where the accused were punished still stands today, along with the graveyard where their souls still ache in pain. The town of Goodsmouth is still around to this day, only instead of housing Puritans, it now houses the families of correctional officers who work at Abbott State Penitentiary. Around the 18th century, another horrible atrocity would occur, this time not involving Puritans, but slaves. Various independent merchants and sea captains saw the immense profit in trading slaves across the Atlantic throughout the 17th and 18th century. This, of course, was known as the Middle Passage. the route taken by slave traders traveling from West Africa to the New World. The Middle Passage was one of the biggest atrocities ever committed in human history. It saw the largest forced migration ever seen, and along the way around 3 out of 5 captured slaves would perish. But our focus here is not so much on the Middle Passage, but the large abandoned slave ship vessel that can still be found on Carnet on the northwestern beach. Sometime in the early 18th century, the slave ship en route to Norfolk, Virginia was knocked off route and landed on the island. The slave traders, out of the fear of releasing their slaves would lead to their death, decided to leave their cargo trapped beneath the hull. It was here where the slaves slowly were eaten by rats while still held in chains. To this day, the ship still remains. Even after 3 centuries, the rotten wooden vessel still serves as a reminder of how cruel regular people can be. Deep within the vessel are the creatures known as the Festers. It's originally believed that the Festers themselves represent the souls of the slave traders who left those enslaved individuals to rot in the hull. However, given the fact that the Festers have a darker complexion and are covered in rusted chains, it's safe to assume that these same enslaved Africans who met their fate by hungry rats are now the Festers. These creatures are probably the slowest on Carnet Island, but unlike other creatures, they can't be killed with firearms. Rather, you have to use either explosives or melee weapons to dispatch them. Upon killing them, make sure you stand far back, as their bodies will spawn explosive rats. There isn't a lot of information available on what happened on the island between the remainder of the 18th century, but by the early 19th century, Carnet Island would be used by sailors traveling along the East Coast, as there would be a lighthouse installed in 1834. While the lighthouse is still operational to this day, it's known for its constant breakdowns due to its manual crank method, used to shine light on passing ships. It was also during this time that a wealthy family would build a large Victorian home in the year of 1877, but this mansion was abandoned well into the 20th century. In the 1920s, the mansion was converted to Carnet Institution for the Alienated. It was managed by the nefarious Dr. Killjoy, the once controversial psychiatrist and medical practitioner who specialized in curing mental disorders and was known for its unethical treatments than practical ones. Walking around the mansion today, you can still find the many heinous devices used to treat any patients under his care. I use the word treat loosely, as these devices mostly served as tools of immense torture and pain. Oftentimes, Killjoy's patients would serve as nothing but guinea pigs in his sick experiments. The institute would stay in operation until the late 1930s, when the United States government acquired Carnet Island. Throughout the 1940s, during World War II, Fort Malon would be constructed and serve as a coastal defense facility and POW camp. This was the first of many structures built that would eventually become Abbott Penitentiary. The main part of the building, now known as the Death House or Execution Center of Abbott, back then served as the main administration building for the war camp. Walking around the basement of the building, one can still find relics taken from this time. At the time, the fort could hold in excess of 1,000 prisoners, which were controlled by a minor population of guards, consisting of 250. I might be speaking a little speculative, but there was probably a general fear among guards that the German POWs would somehow overpower the small force of guards and take over the facility. This fear prompted a particular army colonel, whose name is lost to history, to take matters in his own hands. On the south side of the island near Carnet's execution building, you can still see the bluff where this same colonel ordered 3 of his own men shot on the suspicion of treason directly after a German plane crashed on the island. With no actual evidence indicating treason, the colonel would soon take his own life rather than being faced with a court-martial. Directly after World War II, control of the island was given to the state of Maryland, and the POW camp was converted into Abbott State Penitentiary. The names of the wrongly executed soldiers were never discovered, and today their souls exist as one of Abbott's largest creatures, known as the Marksman.
Fucking do it! Just fucking kill me!
These tyrants hang spawn up from the ground attached to an execution pole. Within 1 second, they break away from their bonds and release a barrage of rifle rounds on their victims, mimicking the very same way they were executed. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, the remainder of Abbott would be constructed using quarry rock found on the island. The original prisoners that were first sentenced to Abbott were also the original builders. Prisoners at Abbott could expect to work up to 12-hour days in a quarry mine, mining the same rocks that would be used to create prison walls. As you can imagine, working conditions in this mine were dreadful, and any prisoner who complained, they were severely disciplined by the COs.
My legs! You can't just leave us here! Watch out! Cave in!
Oh, shit. You think anybody will care?
Let me out! You gotta help!
They deserve it.
One particular day, after a dangerous cave-in left several prisoners dead or injured, the COs guarding the workers refused to initiate any effort to save the few workers that survived the cave-in. The remaining prisoners in the quarry did not appreciate this. And as a result, several COs were overpowered and skinned alive. Afterwards, they were hanged by the neck in the very same mine they stood guard in. No remains of the COs' bodies were ever recovered, and the situation was all but forgotten. It is believed that the quarry stopped being in operation around the early 1960s, but one can still find the very same mining equipment used by the workers in the same mine, abandoned and forgotten, like the poor souls who were caught in the cave-in. It's rumored that the guards who were executed that day in the quarry now exist as the menacing creatures known as the Newman. These creatures are known for spawning directly from the ceiling and grabbing hold of their victims to strangle them to death. If you ever see a large puddle of blood spawning out of the ceiling, be sure to never walk under it. More than likely, the Newman is waiting for you. Tales of cruelty such as what happened to the workers in a quarry mine would become a mainstay at Abbott, but no method of execution was ever more heinous as the ones inflicted on the prisoners considered to be too dangerous even by Abbott standards. Throughout the later 20th century, there were stories that COs would commonly find more of the troublesome prisoners and bury them alive. Yes, alive. Numerous prisoners throughout the later 20th century would meet their fate tightly bound in straitjackets, wrapped in chains, and nailed in a box where their bodies would just rot away in the ground as they slowly lost more and more oxygen. The souls of these poor individuals now serve as another dangerous creature known as the Burrowers. These tunneling creatures love to sneak up on victims and emerge out of the ground. From there, they use their rusted chains to ensnare their victims and squeeze the life out of them.
Sweet! This is it! We're set now. It's like a vault in here. Nothing can get in.
Nothing.
You say something?
Yes.
What was that? I think the dope's coming back.
Breathe deep.
That smell! What in the fuck's going on?
That always feels good. He needed to go. He wasn't interesting enough.
One particular executioner who gained a notable reputation for his enjoyment and dispassionate death was CO Horus Gage. He is best remembered for his consistent use of the gas chamber for the majority of the executions he oversaw. Here was a man who not only did his job efficiently, but also loved it to the point of actually committing suicide in the chamber itself. Some prisoners today still claim that Horus can be found lurking around Abbott, still seeking victims for his own special gas. Anytime you see a green gas coming from a vent or air duct, your best bet is to run for your life, as Horus is probably nearby waiting for you to take a breath. Another strange creature related to the crimes committed against prisoners is the Slayer. The origins of this blade-wielded monster are largely unknown, but it's believed that these creatures represent the unauthorized decapitations of several prisoners as a form of punishment. These creatures more than likely outnumber any of the other paranormal monsters found on the island. They are fast, cunning, and put up a tremendous fight. And unlike the other creatures on Carnet, they actually hunt in packs and typically try to ambush their victims when they least expect it. It's quite fitting that Abbott's cemetery was actually named after the very same guard who oversaw and administered the most executions in Abbott's history. Haunt Cemetery was made for those prisoners who died at Abbott yet had no family to claim their remains. This site is filled with some of the less desirable prisoners. One prisoner who met his fate via electric chair was Horus Gage, the very same inmate who killed his own wife during a conjugal visit. It's believed that Horus killed his wife out of the desire to protect her from the outside world, but most, if not all, know the full story. Horus was driven to kill his wife by Carnate Island's depressing atmosphere, and it's the same atmosphere which he dwells in today. If you ever smell searing flesh and smoke, it means that Horus isn't too far away. Horus might just be one of Abbott's many prisoners who were executed via electric chair. However, just looking at his torn flesh, one can see that his execution wasn't planned well. On the day of his execution, the electric chair actually malfunctioned, and what should have been a quick death turned into a drawn-out scene of immense torture. This left his body, face, and scalp covered in burn scars. Compared to the other entities that haunt Abbott, Horus is the least evil. However, he is very much prone to fits of rage and madness, and will often lash out on anyone nearby. Anyone except the main protagonist, Torque. Speaking of executions, let's turn our attention back again to the Death House. Out of the locations of Carnate Island and Abbott, the Death House serves as the most haunted place. Just as the name states, this is where the vast majority of prisoners were executed by means of gas chambers, electric chairs, and a more humane form of execution, known as lethal injection. This form of execution was seen as a less cruel way to execute death row inmates by the late 1970s. However, the lethal injection method used at Abbott only served as another form of torture. Awful and terrifying screams of those victims can still be heard from Carnate's smallest paranormal creatures, the mainliners. Although they are small, do not underestimate them. They are known for injecting poisonous needles into their victims that slowly drain a person's health to the point of death. It's pretty hard to give an accurate presentation on Carnate Island's history since there's little information to go off of besides the notes left by Consuela, the wife of C.O. Ernesto, and Chem, an older prisoner who Torque can assist in escaping the island. But what little information remains allows us to paint somewhat of a picture of how events on the island unfolded. Speaking of events, it's never clear when these creatures actually began sparking up, but it's generally believed that they began spawning on the very night that Torque was sent to the island as a death row inmate. Now, prior to Torque's arrival, it seems that any residents of the island, regardless of who they are met or experienced some twisted fate or circumstance. It's almost as if the island itself was conceiving of ways to get rid of visitors and residents since it was originally inhabited by Puritans in the 17th century. Consider Goodsmouth throughout this time, as the town was never able to grow or prosper due to the sheer bleakness and atrocities of the island. Also consider the failing lighthouse that for some reason always breaks down and needs to be restarted. Or how about the small house located on the island that mysteriously set fire in the 19th century? Heck, even the slave ship crash, which probably acted as a deterrent against people even passing by the island. When we finally get to the events that happen in the game, it would appear that Torque's presence on the island is what led to the arrival of these supernatural creatures. With all that said, we have to ask ourselves exactly who Torque is, and what is his role in the grand narrative of Carnate Island and Abbott. We already know that Torque was sentenced to death row for the murder of his wife and 2 sons. However, it's revealed pretty early in the game that he never gave an account of the event or admitted to any wrongdoing. The reasonable conclusion given was that he blacked out one day and woke up to find his family slain, but it's never revealed if he actually did it or not. And that's where the player comes in. Depending on the choices you make throughout the game, you will get a certain ending. Particularly, you have to decide if you want to help the prisoners and COs you encounter along the way stay alive and reach safety, or ignore them, or just flat out kill them yourself. And every time one of these encounters occurs, the inner voice inside of you urges you to act on your worst intentions. But at the same time, the voice of your wife urges you to protect the NPCs and see to their safety. Of course, you could just act on your worst intentions and prove all those negative perceptions about you correct. And with each bad decision you make, the more evil-minded you become. Turning our attention back to the history of the island for a second, while the island tries to deter people from residing on it, at the same time, the island also traps souls of those it finds the evilest. Take Hermes Haunt or Horus Gage, 2 residents of the island who did in fact make the wrong choices and acted in their worst intentions. Both of these souls still rest on the island, along with the souls of the 3 girls who made the false witchcraft accusations, or the souls of those abusive COs who did nothing to help entrap prisoners during the horror cave-in. And now that Torque finds himself on the island, he too faces the chance of getting his soul entrapped on the island for all of eternity. And largely, the events on Carnate Island that occurred in the game's story are a direct result of Torque's arrival to the island. Why exactly is the island reacting to Torque in the way that it is? Well, it needs Torque to be one of the several entities and creatures that help deter visitors and punish residents of the island. Specifically, if you look at the creature that Torque can become, it shares a similar resemblance to the Slayers and Marksman creatures. And believe me, that is more than a coincidence. The monster that Torque turns into represents all his evil intentions that are allowed to take a physical form due to the supernatural presence on the island. While the creature is able to come out at the push of a button command, the island itself wants Torque to become the creature fully. This is why Torque is being presented with choices to save or help NPCs he encounters. The island is trying to turn him into a walking abomination that already rests inside of him. The events that unfold in the game serve as a convenient way to entice Torque to make all the wrong decisions. Originally, I was going to explore each ending of the game. However, I think it's important for everyone to experience the ending on their own. Regardless of the choices you'll make, The Suffering will serve as a fantastic horror game to play and enjoy for hours. This is Bob of Smoking Fiend Productions signing off. Thanks for watching, y'all. Please leave a like on the video and maybe even share with your friends. And in case you are wondering, all the footage used in the video was captured using an illegal emulator. If you are wondering the best way to experience The Suffering yourself, yeah, you could buy the console versions for the PS2 and Xbox, but seriously, just break the law and play the emulated version for the PS2. I mean, you're already playing a game set in prison, right? Once again, thanks for watching. See you next time.
I know Jesus is with me, man. Whatever I've done, the Reverend says Jesus has forgiven me.
Will you shut the fuck up, you baby-raping, sodomizing sack of shit?